First and foremost, I'd like to start off by praising God and also giving a shout out to our sponsors. We would first like to thank the Ramirez family for being our biggest sponsor and helping us continue to give us the information, motivation, education that we need in our community. Next, we would like to thank SoCal Tattoo out of Tarzana, California. SoCal Tattoos, where all your tattoo needs will be met. Go out there and check them out and let them know AC sent you. And last but definitely not least, Rockstar Plumbing Company out of Chatsworth, California. You can reach them at 818-814-3044 for all your plumbing needs. And now, without further ado, let the show begin. Man, we're back to StreamYard, man. I like this little StreamYard so far, man. Shout out to everybody out there coming over to see an educational debate, man. Since the beginning of the platform, I've always wanted to elevate the conversation, have conversations that people, may find kind of taboo. And today is one of those days, but today is a great day. We have, first and foremost, shout out to the Bay Area. Shout out to all the homies from up north. We're having a conversation today that isn't about street politics. It's about something much, much more important, which is actual politics, whether it's on a national level, whether it's on a local level. We're gonna sit here and speak like men, like adults. We may not agree on everything, but at the end of the day, we can sit here and speak like it to show the youth and other people, not even the youth. A lot of adults don't know how to speak this way. So let me introduce our guest. Our guest runs the International Underground. He's the host of the International Underground out of the Bay Area. Shout out and please give a warm welcome to Westbay. What's good, my man?
Man, thank you for having me. I appreciate that, man. You know what I'm saying?
It's all love. We first came in on this because, I post somewhat political stuff on Instagram, and a lot of people don't like it, including yourself sometimes. And it was to a point where I was like, you know what, fool, let's just run it, bro. If that's the case, let's just have that conversation. And to me, let me start off with this. I was telling Chris this. I get this a lot, Westbay. I get a lot of people telling me, yeah, as yourself, you did the same thing. Hey, why don't you talk about this? Why don't you talk about that? And I'm like, wait a minute, bro. You have a platform. Why don't you talk about it? So that's my question to you right now.
I'm gonna be honest, with my platform, though we do talk about, international policies, though we talk about national policies, I try to teach the hood that policies, your local policies, are what affect your everyday life. So the majority of my platform is teaching my hoods, that, hey, you don't need 300 million people to change a policy that's going to affect your kid's school. You don't need 300 million people to change policy to get oversight of the local police department. You feel me? So the majority of my conversations, because of that, are usually locally. So that way we can affect actual change. When you're going on a national level or an international level, oftentimes you're simply one speck of sand on a beach.
Right, correct. So talking about changing policies in schools, California currently, I believe, has a policy, and this is jumping straight into our debate, has a policy that forbids teachers from telling parents about their kids if their kids decide that little Tommy wants to be called Jamie and wear a dress in school. My stance is that's completely inappropriate. You should never keep any secrets from parents. What's your stance?
Well, I think that's a little bit, as a parent, a parent with special needs, that's one thing that, we're going to agree on. We're going to have a little bit of middle ground right there. I don't care what it is when it comes to my children. Teaching my kids how to keep something from me, teaching my kids that it's okay to lie to the parents or keep something from parents or have a secret with another adult from your parents. That's something I don't like. That's something I'm against. And, that doesn't matter sexuality or none of that. That just comes as a parent. When it comes to my child, I want to know everything about my child. So I think we have a little bit of room right there.
Yeah, because a lot of times, like when I would post stuff about that certain bill that I did not like, you would get the pushback from, and I'm not sure, do you consider yourself a liberal or what do you consider yourself before we even get too far into this?
Well, that's, okay. Democrat is a big tent, right? The
Yes.
same way you don't have, Confederates and Nazis representing the Trump supporter that might be an extreme side of the Trump team that don't represent the majority of all Republicans. Same thing with far left progressives. Their extreme views don't represent the Big Ten of Democrats. So I am a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat,
Okay.
but my values, I would say, are more, I don't want to say moderate, but more Democrat themselves versus progressive.
More in the center, but would you agree that the Democratic Party in the last 6 years has really gone much more left than before? Because I feel this way, Westbay. I feel that I don't leave the Democratic Party; they left me. My stance is pretty much the same that it was 10 years ago, bro. But it seems like their stance went more and more left. And like when a father like I have grandkids. And I can only imagine how it would have felt being a father in the school telling me, "Hey, we can't tell you anything about your kid, about their medical condition, about certain stuff." And I'd be like, "What are you, crazy?" But the Democratic Party seems to believe that if I feel this way, that I'm a homophobe, that I'm a transphobe, that that I hate gay. I'm like, this has nothing to do with that. This has to do with my child. And that's the part that I believe that a lot of Latinos started going towards the right, because it was like the left was just insulting us every single time they had a chance to. What do you say to people like myself that believe that it's not us that went right, it's that the left went too left for us?
The lines cross you. I mean, so that right there is there's more than one issue what you just addressed right there.
Let's do
So
it.
some of that I can agree with. Let's start off with what I disagree, though. I'm going to start off by saying, as a Democrat, yes, some of the values I feel like have gone away from the traditional Democratic values. However, I don't feel like they went left. I think that some have went left, but I think it's actually gone the other direction. For example, if when I grew up as a youngster, I was protesting and marching against Dick Cheney, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. Democrats used to be against regime change. We used to hate Dick Cheney and Halliburton and anything to do with the Cheneys because they're war profiteers. Yet now we're for regime change in Ukraine. We're for the regime change in Palestine. And that's Democrats. So I feel like that's went more to the right side, right? Because who are the war hawks? That's usually the Republicans. The regime change, that's usually Republicans. So on that stance, I feel like the Democrats are getting a little bit too excited and too happy to be pro-war, which is pro-Pentagon, and I'm gonna agree with that. Now, the trans stuff, I kind of feel like that's a wedge issue. That gets people all up in their feelings and up in their emotions. For example, like when we're gonna talk about this young child that is in high school, we ain't talking about 100 million transgender kids taking over all of sports. We're talking about less than 10 kids in all of California.
Okay,
Right?
so let's start that. You're talking about AB Hernandez, the one who just recently, I believe, won 2 first prize. Maybe one was on the either the triple jump, long jump, and another one was on the high jump. Right? He's a biological boy that's transgender girl that calls himself a girl, and I hear that same answer a lot from Democrats, which is, it's such a small percentage. Why do we make such a big deal about it, right? And this is my answer to you. Exactly. It is such a small percentage, but you are excluding the large percentage of girls and women in sports who are getting affected by this. To me, it's almost like people are living in an imaginary world that can't sit here and admit if there's a difference between boys and girls sports. So my question to you is there a difference, yes or no, between a boy and a girl in sports high school wise? I'm not talking about 8th grade. I coached Little League when my daughter and my son were young, and it was no problem when you're 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. But as you get older, that's why they start having girl sports and boy sports, because boys just are stronger and faster, and it's no knock on women.
Okay, so that's kind of the divide right there, right? What I would first start off is, whenever you're talking about stuff like that, are you talking about policy and how you enforce policy, or are you talking about your feelings and in general? Now,
I'm talking about policy.
Okay, so when you're talking about writing policy, and for example, if you're talking about boxing in the Olympics, that's an international corporation where government has no say so. So whether boys and girls want to play together, government shouldn't be intervening in that anyways. If we really were interested about that, the same way we boycotted the Olympics for all the Russia nonsense back in the 80s, we should boycott that now. But when it comes to setting policy, right? And we're talking about schools, then this is going to be your local school districts or your state. And again, how do you address that with both common sense, which you were just referring to as, hey, a high school boy were to get in the ring with a high school girl, biologically, they're just going to be stronger, faster. I don't use the word better, but they're going to have the advantage on that. So how do you write policy while having compassion, but also using common sense? Because we're not talking about adults when we're talking about this young person running track. We're talking about children. And oftentimes, for example, your platform, that's why I jumped in, is you will see barbarians and cavemen attacking children. And the issue with that is Democrats are going to agree with you a lot of the times on that. But what we're never going to agree with is using policy and weaponizing that to hurt children. Now,
See,
there's some middle ground that we could agree on, like you just said. Hey, when it comes from first grade to eighth grade, most kids are playing co-ed sports. And when you get into high school, most PEs are co-ed sports. So how do you write policy where you're directly not targeting 8 or 9 kids? How do you do that? Because again, we're talking about kids.
that's the thing. You guys are so hung up on the 8 or 9 kids, but you're not worried about the 8 or 9,000 kids that those guys are competing against. So you're pretty much saying, well, we're worried about the transgender kids, but these let's say 8 to 900 high school girls that are in sports, they're being affected by this. They're being affected by this because I believe the woke world just became so woke that they can't tell the Rainbow Mafia, hey, bro, this is unfair to have a boy that's 16 years old. And you can tell it's a boy, bro. You can say every day, I'm a girl, but physically, okay, let me ask you this. What is a trans girl?
No, so none of that, I don't disagree with none of that.
Okay.
Again, the issue that I agree with is how do you implement policy towards that? Right now, let's take, for example, when people run marathons, you have girls running marathons, you have boys running marathons, you have old people running marathons, children running marathons. However, whenever they hand out the medals at the end of that race, they usually break it down into, this category, whether it's adults, here's the men's division, they get the gold plate, the women's division, you know what I mean? And they break it down like that. However, in high school, we don't have that yet. So how do we create that without attacking children? Because again, I agree on the standpoint of, hey, we do want to protect all children, especially I have a daughter, girls that are trying to compete. We want to give them a fair chance. But the reason I truly feel that Democrats, when it comes to the trans committee, even though there is only 8 or 9 people, these type of policies affect and target all trans. And what the big issue is, 40% of trans children attempt to commit suicide by the time they're an adult, right? So what are we doing to contribute to that stat? We're bullying them on social media. We're targeting them in the comment section, making them look like the biggest joke whatsoever. So again, we can agree on the other stuff. Hey, should a boy be able to go one-on-one with the girl? No, that's not unfair. But because of that, should we be able to attack and villainize all trans children? Because of that, there's a happy medium.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We shouldn't be attacking them. But I think that's just a play on the book that says, this is why we shouldn't do this because they're attacking them. No, every kid gets attacked like on social media, regardless of who they are. The problem is this. You have boys, plain and simple, you have boys and girls sports. To me, when I ask you the definition of trans, it's not to catch you. It's to say the definition of trans is somebody who's a male and believes they are a female. But in reality, they have a male body. In other words, they have an advantage over the girls. We've had this separation of girls and boys sports. That's what the answer is, and it's always been there. Isn't it amazing that you get these young boys who, some of them, and I'm sure he was also in boys sports, he wouldn't even rank top 12. right? But now he comes in here and he's 1 and 2, and then with you, you have some common sense. But a lot of people who are Democrats do not. They're gonna what this is the playbook. A lot of times they're gonna start insulting you. They're gonna start saying you're a homophobe. They're gonna start saying you're. I'm not attacking. I am a father, just like many other fathers out there that are concerned that people are so worried and making trans issues like if it was Martin Luther King and that everybody's out there trying to get trans people and beat them up. Nobody cares, bro. In 2025, de verdad, nobody cares if you're trans. Nobody cares if you're gay. The world keeps moving on, but it's like, and I believe this is one of the reasons that Kamala Harris and Biden lost the election, because they were trying to push it so far down our throats and saying, you're going to take it. And as far as schools policy goes, the school in Chino, they got together, the parents got together, they changed the policy as far as saying you will notify the parents. And then here came Gavin Newsom and changed that. So in other words, when we as parents get together and start changing these policies, the government, which you said shouldn't get involved in certain things, is getting involved and saying no. So the government wants to get involved with our kids. And to me, it's a slippery slope like this. I'm not sure how old your daughter is. My daughter's already in her 30s, but I got granddaughters. One's about to be 12. The other one's about 8, right? And to me, when you have children making decisions as far as like, and this all kind of relates, as far as getting surgeries that will affect them for the rest of their life at 13 years old and saying they can make that decision. What's your take on that?
Okay, so you covered a lot of stuff there, right? Now, me personally, I'm not going to pretend that I'm the champion for LGBT rights. You know,
Okay.
I'm familiar with all of the struggles that they go through. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, man, I'm the grand champion that's going to come out for them. Now, one of the big issues is, how do you enforce that into a policy though? Right? Like we can agree on that. But how do you implement policy where you're not weaponizing policies to target individual vulnerable communities? And that I think is where there's the disconnect. Because again, we're going to write policy for 10 kids out of, what is there, like 60 million California residents. So we're going to rewrite policy. And again, policy is supposed to protect people. It's supposed to, especially when it comes to children, because we're not talking about adults. I could care if trans and straight want to do whatever the fuck they want to do as adults. Excuse my language. I don't know if this is uncensored or not.
Sorry, brother.
As an adult, if you want to do whatever you want as adult behind closed doors, man, have at it. You feel me? But when we're talking about children, whether they're trans, whether they're straight, whatever they are, we have to be more gentle and more protected, which doesn't mean we're not allowed to do nothing. I'm just simply saying there needs to be some form of compassion when we're talking about implementation of policy. And I think
I agree with you on that. But again, it comes back to the same thing. We're making major compassion for 10 kids, but we're excluding all the other women or girls that are in the sports. So at the end, you're kind of saying, oh, we need to worry about these, but you got the house burning with all these other kids back there. So to me, that kind of, it's like the compassion is this. How about this?
I'm sorry.
Leave it to what it was. Boys play with boys and girls play with girls after like high school, whatever it is. And the thing is with that, they're like, no, that's the problem, that regular families are looking at this and saying, so what is so hard about that? And it's like, you can't get a Democrat, I'm not saying you yourself, to just sit there and admit that and say, you know what, it is unfair. They should have boys with boys, or even give them their own league. But again, it's like, no, we want to play there. However, we want to play there, but it's not. Okay. Do you believe in a high school level that it is fair for those girls to compete against AB Hernandez?
No, that's the easy answer, right? I think every parent.
What's the answer?
The easy answer is no, it is not fair.
Okay.
Now I'm going to say this, it doesn't come about puberty time when boys start developing and girls start developing. There is the unification of co-ed sports is going in different directions.
Yes.
Girls cannot keep up physically with boys. We can agree on that. That's not where Democrats are disagreeing on. It's the implementation of policy. Now, are we going to go into some old school Sharia law where, no boys can ever play with girls in high school? Well, what if it's a dart competition? What if it's playing pool? Again, it can't be a broad brush towards everything. That's why we're talking about compassion, first off, and common sense. Hey, if it's a weightlifting competition, of course not. You know, if people are shooting darts or playing pool, I don't know. We'd have to weigh that out and how that
But
affects stuff.
it's gotten there. The Canadian record was broken by a guy who said he was a female. See, I think you've forgotten the craziness that was going on under the Biden administration. Under the Biden administration, it became a free for all, bro. And everybody's looking at like, what's going on over here? You had a Canadian guy who identify as a woman, go in there and destroy the women's competition. So then you had a guy go in there and say, I identify as a woman. He went back there and broke his record. You had, I think it was Leah Thomas, the swimming one that was destroying the competition. And it seems like the liberals are so afraid to sit there and go against the rainbow mafia, bro, because you go against them, they're coming at you, and that's like a big base of theirs. Whereas if it's common sense, you tell them, no, this is not fair to the other people. Like, come on. And it seems like you are on that mindset, but a lot of your party isn't. Like, let's say you say protecting the kids, right? There was children books that were, and I actually ordered one because I didn't believe it myself, that was sitting there talking about oral sex, talking about gay sex, showing male. Like, I was like, what is this? I actually put it on my YouTube channel and I got struck down for a week, bro. And I was like, wait a minute, how am I getting struck down for a week for showing you a book that is in a children's library? But you ask a liberal about that, not saying you yourself, and they say it's okay. So what is your take on people having, or schools having library books about gay sex and all this in the elementary level?
I think it was actually at my child's school that it was all over the news that came out. It was like gay bears or something. Now, again, this is where I think the media will run with the fringe side of the Democratic Party and pretend that that is the majority of how Democrats feel, especially when it comes to parents. Now, again, I don't speak for all Democrats because Democrats are a very big tent, you know, but that is a conversation that most Democrats have. And when you sit down and discuss, like I had a conversation with the school board. We had a debate with a school board member who had this kind of the same feelings that you have, right?
Okay.
And he was like, "Hey, why is the second grader having a conversation about some gay bears, whether they're trans bears or whatever the hell? I forget what the actual book was. I think it was about some gay bears. But why is the second grader having this conversation, right? Now, the majority of Democrats are going to agree with you on that. They're going to be like, that's right. You know what I mean? My daughter is too young to understand any form of sex whatsoever, right, much less different versions of that. But at what age do you have that conversation? Because unfortunately, some kids, they get their education about all that forms of sex from the playground. Yes. They don't have, not all kids got great parents that are going to come and break it down to them. And a lot of kids are very homophobic, are very really just crude kids. All kids are.
Kids are just, they're mean, bro. Kids are just mean.
All kids are. And so when you got this category, and this is the issue, this is the compassion issue here, right? How do you, because just because one's right doesn't mean the other must be absolutely wrong, or correct, vice versa. You know what I mean? So where's the middle ground there? How do we address this while knowing at the same time that this group of children, let's take a group of children and let's know that 40% of them are going to try to commit suicide by the time they're an adult. 40% of them. Right? So how do you be a human and say, hey, man, I don't want to contribute to that stat in any way whatsoever, but I can't let your child destroy my child in sports. Where's the compassion there? You know, and what we're getting is knee-jerk reactions that are like, oh, we need to have an extreme this, we need to have an extreme that. When in reality, there's somewhere in the middle, just like they do, like I said, in marathons, we're like, hey, if a boy wants to, if that situation wants to go down, then it is up to the adults in the room when we're talking about children of how we're going to, you know, hand out the trophies. And if adults can do it in a marathon or a triathlon where they're like, we're going to all have you run the same race, but when it comes to giving you guys awards, well, you're going to go in this category and you're going to go in this category. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground right now. We have Republicans that want to say you must love the devil if you're for trans kids, and we have Democrats that are saying you must hate all gays if you want equality in any form whatsoever. And so,
right. Well,
I think
go ahead, go finish. I'm sorry.
But no, I think that's the real problem when there is a lot of middle ground where there's a lot of parents. Because take away the mainstream narratives, take away the people on social media, and you just talk to the parents. Most parents aren't going to go hella hard on somebody else's kid. If they really
No, they're
have an
not.
issue, they're going to go talk to that other parent, right? However, you get this kind of boogeyman narrative on social media that all parents are needing to do this. Like I said, when in reality, a lot of parents are like, look, if that kid want to run around, Ms. Hernandez, whoever that kid is, I'm not really familiar with exactly his name and all that. But if that kid want to dress however in the hell that kid want to dress and do whatever in the hell they're wanting to do, so be it. I ain't
Of
their
course.
parent. It's up to the school districts to say, hey, to make it fair to the rest of the children, so they're not breaking all the records. We're gonna put their records in a different category.
Where
You know,
do we draw the line? The reason there is like what do they call that? The special sports, like it's Olympics, Special Olympics.
my wife be
They
saying that all the time. Special Olympics,
they
absolutely.
they put certain kids in Special Olympics because they can't keep up with the other kids. So at what point do we start saying, it's almost like we're using the compassion thing and saying, oh well, they should just be there. If that's the case, then sports should just be like when you're in second grade and everybody gets an award for participation. And this is the whole point of sports, is for competition, and it teaches children how hard it is to be number one and win, and how tough it is to take a loss, but it's a part of the learning curve. But when you're sitting here, to me, I understand the part that you're saying as far as, the suicide rate and all that, but that has zero to do with sports. That has a lot to do with the mental stuff that's going on in these kids' heads. And when you're getting a child, and a child is a boy, and you're as a parent saying, oh, you can be a girl if you want. No, you cannot. I'm sorry. And I think what happens is you start brainwashing these kids to believe they can be these women, they can be these girls. And when they hit the world smacks them in the face and says, I'm not accepting your reality. I'm sorry. And then they're going to commit suicide. That's not my fault. That is something that them with their family have to deal with. So you shouldn't bring those issues into sports. It should be either two category, boys or girls. And if they want their third category, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack right there.
Yeah, let's do it.
One of the issues is the narrative that trans children, because they want to win a trophy, they transition. That's not reality. If a kid is gay, a kid is gay. If a kid is transitioning because he's gay, sports ain't got nothing to do with that. So that's one issue, and I think that people are trying to blur in that narrative of, we're going to start having boys that are losers just join the girls team. So just like that Adam Sandler movie. That's not how reality works, and that's not how parents that are having to cope with that deal with their children. That's not how that works. Now, I'm not going to act like there's not some fringe case where that hasn't happened before, but that's not the reality of 99 out of 100 kids. Right. And again, because of that narrative right there, not just the kids in sports that are trans, all trans, because this is so popular, those kids get targeted and bullied because of this topic right here until they self-harm. That's the issue, where we're weaponizing policy and we're using that as a sword to hurt children instead of using it as a shield to protect children. That's the problem where we're dividing that. Everything else we can agree on.
I get it, brother. Do you believe that for, let's say, you got a parent and they have a daughter, right? They're going around from competition to competition. This kid's been doing track and field for the last 8 to 10 years since they were little kids. And now they've run their butt off, but this transgender girl goes in there, beats their butt. And now I got to see my kid sit in second place because I have to bow down to whatever you're going through as a small percentage that you said. You think it's fair for those parents and for that child to sit there and get second place because the boy won?
See, this is where I think there's the confusion on. I don't think there's a single Democrat or single parent in general that thinks that's fair. It's just, who are we going to target, attack, bully, villainize because of that?
We're not villainizing, we're not attacking. We're saying it's wrong.
Unfortunately, though, if you go into your comment section, 99 out of 100 of your comments, of not you personally, but
Yeah.
your audience is going to be shredding these children to death until they self-harm and commit suicide. When in reality, the persons they should be targeting are the people running these tournaments, the people in charge of all these sports. You should never be villainizing the children. We should never be blaming the children. It
I
is
agree with
our duty as adults in the room to be like, I don't care how barbaric these Neanderthals are on social media in the comments section. When it comes to the parents and the adults, we know who is directly responsible for these competitions, and it's the adults that are holding these competitions. But these adults that are holding these competitions know if I have a transgender at one of my meets, that shit's going to be all over international news.
But
When
those are
instead,
Democrats who run that.
what's that?
Those are Democrats that run that in California. Those are Democratic policies, bro. So at the end, okay, I agree with you. They should not be bashing the child. They should not be villainizing the child. It has nothing to do with that child. The child's only getting away with what the adults are doing. But now is the person that Gavin Newsom, after he's been told by the Trump administration, you need to stop doing this. Gavin Newsom is the main jefe, and he's the one that puts down the law, and he's pretty much looking the other way. So isn't that the Democratic Party that's pushing for this?
I'm gonna disagree. I would say
that sounds like a yes.
I'm going to say that there's a big chunk of the Democrats. Again, when it's a big tent, we're not the Democratic Party. Fortunately, are not cult members. So
Right.
there's a lot of people that have completely different opinions from one side versus moderate Democrats that have a completely different with the other side. So again, there's a lot of people that are going to agree with what you're saying right there. It's just the implementation of how we're going to do things. That is where everybody is breaking up at. Hey, are we going to attack the kids? Are we going to ban kids? Are we going to blame kids? The conversation should be, who are the peoples organizing these events? And I'm going to be honest with you.
What's your answer, Westbay? What's your answer to it? If there is an answer, let's get down to that now before we move on.
I seen because again, let me stress again, even though I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, I am not all things LGBTQ. There is definitely a big gay community in here, and you do see that the gay community gets bullied more than any. You don't got a bunch of gay kids running around the hoods bullying everybody.
Who's dying more on the streets, gay kids or Black and Latino kids that are straight? That's why when I hear that argument all the time, I'm like, bro, we're the ones dying out here.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I know that there is no group of Latinos that are attempting to commit suicide at 40%.
No, we're killing each other at a much higher percent.
I agree that there's some violence on that, but that's apples and oranges. When we're talking on this, what are we doing that is directly contributing to kids self-harming? That's the most, as the adults, if you care about children, period, are you contributing to children self-harming? Are you the shields for that? And so what we're saying is Democrats, we're like, hey, no matter what, when it comes to policy for kids, I am always going to defend kids. I don't give a fuck what it is.
Well, now you're defending the trans kids, but not worried about the girls in sports.
That's negative, because that would be me saying that, hey, I don't think there should be different categories. That's why I'm saying there can be common sense. There is something other than a knee-jerk reaction that must be one extreme to the other. There can be common ground. Like I said, there's tons of events, triathlons, co-ed events where they exist together, and then they medal them out separately, or they place them in whole different categories. That seems reasonable to me here in liberal California. Now, that may not work in Mississippi, that may not work in Alabama, but the majority of the Democratic state of California, where they're saying, hey, that would be, and again, that's policy, and how do you implement that? And that's the big problem, because how do you protect all the children that you're saying, the category, all the girls that are going to come in second place, that's been trying their whole life? How do you protect them while at the same time not encouraging kids to jump off a cliff, right? And you can't balance both. Like I just said, like, hey, if you feel like this one kid is dominating events, we should be talking to all the local school boards saying, hey, you need to medal these kids out in a different way. This kid should be, so he doesn't break every school record, he should go under this category.
Yeah, but they've tried that. They've tried that, and what happens? You get the Rainbow Mafia, and they're saying you're being a homophobe. You're not letting our kids do our thing. It's like the small minority in the Democratic Party has taken over the majority, bro, and not worried about the majority's thoughts and issues. I've had teachers call me directly on my other Google phone I had before, right? They're like, Gil, I agree with you with this stuff, but I can't say anything because I'm scared of getting fired. There's so many people that walk on eggshells when it comes to stuff like this because they're afraid of being outed or being exposed or being shown like they're homophobic. And it's not that. We care about our kids. I think it's, listen, different categories, bro, but that's not going to happen. And why? Because the Democrats refuse to let it happen.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I do, and I ain't gonna be mad at the LGBTQ community if I'm saying that wrong. I'm not gonna be mad at them because they're involved and they have a huge voice.
Yeah.
But what it should be is that we need a lot more parents to get involved and step in, because as you say, I don't think it's Democrats that run sports. Usually that's more of a Republican thing. Republicans love
Not in
sports
California.
a lot more than Democrats. And here in California, that's another thing I kind of want to jump to. Everybody that wears the Democratic hat in California is not a Democrat. California is simply just a majority Democratic state. So in order for you to be involved in politics, you have to wear a Democratic hat,
Fortunately.
or you're not going to get involved in any actual debates. You're not going to be involved. You're not going to get any funding, and you're not going to have a chance. So
No, look.
every person, whether they're moderate or Republican or not, they have to wear the Democrat. So Democrats get blamed for everything in California.
Well, this is like, it's a perfect example right now. We have LGBTQ Pride Month this month, right? And I think this year they finally got a little smart because Biden's not in office. For the last couple of years, bro, and I did this as well. I posted on my YouTube. I got kicked off for a week again. I posted where those guys are running around butt naked on their bikes, little kids right in there. What does a grown man being naked in front of a 9-year-old child have to do with anything? This happened in every Pride Month that's been happening before this administration. And when you question them, oh, it's love, it's this. No, at some point, it's almost like you're sitting here and you're grooming a child. So to me, that's the crazy part, that people who are in my seat who believe that the Democrats left us, not the other way around. What's your thoughts on grown men being naked in front of kids at Pride events?
No, hell no. No. Again, when it comes to children, I have a zero tolerance for that. And that's also, I think that's where the media takes these fringe clips and they act like that's like a majority of the Democrats. That's 60% of Democrats, when that's like 10% of Democrats. And 9 times out of 10, if some weirdo were to walk in front of my kid, I'll probably be in jail. You know what I mean?
You better never go to an LGBTQ Pride because you might just see that player.
No,
All
no,
right, West.
no, and I'm not gonna let me not hate on the LGBTQ community, because
We're not hating them.
I have went to the hate street, the what is it called, the Castro district for Halloween, and those are some super dope ass events that ain't just nothing but gay. That's an everybody event, right?
Yeah, dope.
And there's some super parties, but the same way you would see some whores at a nightclub showing their tits, you're going to see some whores at these events doing the same thing. It's unfortunate that some people in the media are trying to say that all of a sudden these super wild party events are now family events. Again, that's where I think the lines have crossed, and they weaponize that. They blur these events together. Like now, instead of this being a super party, this is now a family event that you should bring in your kids.
Well,
And
don't you remember the last Easter before Biden took off? You had a bunch of transgenders over there, one showing off the boobs, the guys with the beards. That stuff is just like, they were just bowing down to him and talking about bowing down. So what are your thoughts? And this is something the Biden administration definitely, which is the head of the party, he's the president, definitely supported, was having drag queen shows in front of children. You tell me that.
Again, here in the Bay Area, we were all over the news at the San Lorenzo library, where they were having drag shows, their drag show reading to children. Now, the organizers that did that weren't parents. They knew that was going to get a bunch of clicks and that was going to put them on social media. But that is not 90% of Democrats. That's not 60% of Democrats. That's the fringe in our party that wants to get a buzz. And so they use that. And unfortunately, children get targeted because of that. And they don't speak for all of us. They don't represent all of us. Again, it don't matter who you are, unless you're a weirdo, a pervert, or a pedo. When it comes to children, We don't want to have no type of sex conversations with our children.
Okay, I definitely agree with you on that
You
one,
know what I
brother.
mean? So ain't nobody like, ooh, I can't wait to have another different type of conversation about sex. Excuse me. I don't want to have no type of conversations like that with my daughter, with my son, with nobody. And like me, the majority of parents, they feel that way. But unfortunately, Fox News don't cover that. You know what I mean? They usually, again, they taking these fringe clips and they acting like not only is that the majority, that's like a unanimous decision when it's not unanimous. We're a very big tent and they're taking the most radical ideas and they're trying to act like that's the mainstream for us. I do agree with you. Hey, this one wing of the party has taken over the rest of our party. And unfortunately, because of that, there are we lost a presidential election, and there's going to be a lot of pushback. But that's what happens when you have a big tent. Whenever somebody elbows you, you need to elbow them back. We don't have to be enemies. We don't have to be against each other. But right now, they're a big voice in the Democratic Party. Now, that's up to the rest of us, minorities, black, brown, and everybody in between. That's up to the rest of us to get more involved. However, unfortunately, what happens is when stuff like that happens, instead of people getting more involved, they get less involved, less interested. And so this same fringe has even a bigger monopoly. So I'm gonna kind of look in the mirror and say, if you want to change that, you have to be more involved. And what you can't say is that's the majority. You can't say that's universal. That's just not how it works.
I don't believe it's universal, but when you have the president supporting that stuff, which was Joe Biden, I think it's like anything else. Like Gavin Newsom, he's the guy that calls the shots out here, and all trickles down. When Joe Biden's pretty much pushing that and pushing the gay agenda and having the rainbow flag on top of the White House, it was like, and they did it just for it's like they did it for the clout, for the views, because I've been watching politics long enough to know that Obama was against gay marriage. Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage. Biden was against gay marriage. They were so against gay marriage, but then somebody got in their ear like, hey, dude, if we get these guys, we'll get some power. And they did. And they won for a while, but after that, they overplayed their cards. But let's took it over to another one. What do you want to go? You want to go tariffs or immigration?
Man, I'm gonna let you man the ship right now. I'm just riding in the passenger. But let me just say real quick on the Biden thing. I absolutely do agree. Obama was against, he was, I believe it was Prop 8 here in California, where it's for gay marriage. You know what I mean? Yes, they do that. And they did kind of, I think they put too much on that. But again, let's remember they were simply trying to correct an unjust and they overcorrected. I'm not mad at an overcorrection. That's what are we supposed to do? Ignore what was going on with the community and just wait till it gets worse, or you try to address it. They try to address it and overcorrect it. Now, what we don't want to do is nail them to a cross and say, don't ever try to fix something again. Whenever you overcorrect something, you just need to kind of hone it in a little bit. I think that's what's going on right now.
Talking about overcorrection, I believe that's what's going on in the immigration world right now. I think you had a president before Trump, Trumpito, as I like to call him here, that left the border completely open. Told us Biden left the border completely open. Said, "Don't trust your eyes. What you're seeing in the news isn't real. What's going on in New York isn't real. All these illegal aliens coming here isn't real." And I think that turned a lot of voters off. And that's another reason that people voted for Trump. And now Trump is doing the overcorrection. But before we get over to his overcorrection, what is your thoughts on immigration just as a whole?
Well, that's a loaded one. There's a lot in there. Now, when it comes to immigration, right? Unfortunately, black and brown Americans are oftentimes have to compete against the undocumented folks. So it directly affects us the worst. And so we're almost competing against each other. And just like the Democratic Party, because let's remember, I feel like this is another overcorrection. Before Trump and Biden, brown folks actually referred to Obama as the deporter in chief because he deported more people, more babies, lost babies, put babies in cages more than anybody else. And unfortunately, Biden got blamed for all that because people don't want to blame minorities. They want the easy scapegoat. It wasn't Obama.
Yeah, but Biden was the vice president, homeboy. He's got to take some of that blame. Come on, he's the VP.
No doubt. But as you just said, when Biden was doing, was supporting gay folks, we weren't blaming no one else. We was blaming Biden. And the same way when Obama was in office deporting everybody, we can't blame the VP. We blame the leader, and that was Obama. Obama was the deport in chief. Biden, however, he wanted to correct that, and again, I feel like he overcorrected. And when it comes to brown people, I ain't mad at the overcorrection. I ain't mad at the overcorrection, right? It did affect us. It did hurt us. Again, we need to hone that in, and we tried to bring that in. Democrats before Trump was in office, Democrats did try to pass a bill, one of the most conservative-leaning bills for immigration, but Trump said, "Don't do that. You'll give the Democrats a win. I do not want any form of win for the Democrats." So the Republicans went against that. So again, you can't be mad if you got one
Talk
party.
about that real quick. That bill that they tried to pass was in the fourth quarter of their administration. The administration was almost done. They were trying to save face and say, listen, we're going to pass this bill. This will help close the border. Trumpito came in here, didn't pass no bill. He just enforced the laws that are on the books, and that border is next to shut down, bro. So in other words, they didn't need a bill to close the border. They just needed to enforce the rules and the laws. And the Biden administration refused to do that. And you can tell how tough immigration is, because people were telling the governor of Texas, "Oh, you just keep them." He started shipping them over to New York. Next thing you know, you have the New York mayor sounding like a Republican. Hey, what are these people doing here? I can't handle this stuff. So that bill that they tried to pass was all smoke and mirrors to try to save face. Because if you ask Kamala Harris, "Oh, no, the border's closed." If you ask anybody in the Biden administration, "No, the border's closed." And we as human beings are watching this like, what are these guys talking about? This thing's completely wide open.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack right there. Now, the reason it was really important that Biden tried to pass that before, because the difference between a bill being passed, that's the law of the land here on out, which is different than Trump, who's doing executive orders. Then that has a sunset of, then if Trump's out of office in 3 years, then that policy is irrelevant in 3 years. So we're back to square one right here in 3 years. So it don't matter if it's at the end of your term. It doesn't matter at the beginning of the term. If you're trying to pass policy, these are long-term situations. Whenever you're just doing an executive order, like we're seeing with the federal judges right now, that shit can be revoked in all different types of ways. So if you're trying to actually address this long term, not trying to put a Band-Aid, then you're trying to do what the Democrats and Biden did and pass that through the House, let the Senate approve that, and let that become law. Because if it isn't law, at the end of the term, at the end of Trump's term, everything that he did that was an executive order is poof.
Well, to say poof, that is DACA. DACA, the Dreamer Act, was a poof bill done by Barack Obama, who, by the way, had the House, had the Senate. He was the president. He could have easily passed immigration reform. Okay. When I say they, I say the Democrats, bro. I was a lifelong Democrat, my man. And what I got tired of was the word salad and them promising us everything. They had such a majority at that point. Obama could have got some immigration law passed. But you know what? That's what they do to us all the time. They'll sit there and give us false promises, false things. Vote for me. And as soon as they come in office, he passed DACA. That was it. How did he pass it? With an executive order, which, by the way, Donald Trump could have just said, get this out of here. And he told them, give me some money for the wall, and I will give everybody from DACA a way to become a citizen. He did, which they should have given him the money at the time, because they've given so much money to Ukraine. But it was like the Democrats like to just stand on what's hot right now. They're those guys. They're the cloud chasers, bro. They're running around and say, what's hot right now? What can I jump on? Why didn't Obama pass that same bill that you talk about, that he had the House and the Senate?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack right there.
There's always a lot to unpack in American Cholo.
First things first, whenever you're talking about walls and whenever you're talking about that shit, you're villainizing brown folks. You know where the majority of immigrants come? You know how the majority of immigrants come here? They come on an airplane. They come from China. They come from India. So if you cared about immigration, illegal immigration, we would have walls built around all of our international airports, and we would prevent the Chinese and Indian people from overstaying their work visas and simply staying here. Okay, so that wasn't really a concern. The second thing, when we're trying to villainize the southern border, I'd like to ask you, do you remember how the terrorists from 9/11 got into America?
I believe a lot of them came like on visas, bro. They were here.
No. I'm asking you what border they came into.
What border they come in through? I thought they flew in here, some of them. I didn't know they came into the Mexican border, Canada border, maybe.
Negative. Thank you, sir. Right there. Yes. And that's exactly correct. If we really cared about border security, we'd be building a wall in Canada, because the terrorists of 9/11, they flew into Canada and they walked their happy asses right across the Canadian border into the East Coast, right? Yet we want to villainize the southern border and use all this verbiage of military age men are crossing the border. They're scary brown folks that are crossing the border. When the reality is, if folks is trying to get here, they're gonna fly into Canada, walk right across, and there ain't nothing they can do. And if we're trying to stop illegal immigration, they're gonna simply fly into an American airport and overstay their work visa. And
Well,
again,
I think
these people aren't.
that's very
These
few. We're
people
talking
aren't.
about 10,000 people that were coming at a time. You saw the news. You saw stuff. That wasn't no gaslighting. That was real. That if you're from Haiti, you're from China, you're from this, caravans week after week after week.
I absolutely agree with. I agree with that. Yet still, Chinese and Indian immigrants were the number one immigrants with all of that happening.
Right,
With
right.
all of that happening. So if you care about that and you're not just targeting brown people, well, bro, why aren't we building walls and stuff on the airport? And again, because we villainizing our own, we going after our own. And unfortunately, Trump, this is why I'm always going to be against Trump, because when it comes to brown folks, not everybody else, brown folks, Trump has a hard on for us. And that's what I don't like. If you saw one of his last interviews with Peter, whoever in the hell it was,
Right.
he was talking about how they're like what you just was saying. There's over 20 million immigrants in America, illegal immigrants in America right now. So in order for 20 million illegal immigrants to be deported, there's going to have to be some due process. They're going to have to go to court. Well, Trump's saying that will never happen because America doesn't have enough courts, doesn't have enough judges for that to happen. It would take like 200 years. So he wants to do what they did back in the day, which was called Operation Wetback, where they just rounded up everybody brown and they sent their ass to Mexico and dropped them off, right? And that's what they're currently, if you listen to Stephen Miller, whatever his little
Similar.
whatever his little mouthpiece is, they're trying to do it with the Alien Act, where they're trying to do that with brown folks right now. However, they're swooping up brown Americans, not undocumented immigrants, not documented immigrants. They're swooping up brown Americans, and they're not even allowed. They're trying to make this policy where they don't need to see a courtroom, they don't need to see a judge if you're a brown person. So you could be sent to some gulag in El Salvador and you never get out just because you're brown. And even worse, because when Trump had that meeting with the Salvadorian president, not only was he asking if he could send more American criminals, he also found out that Libya in Africa, they're willing to take as many Americans and the immigrants that you want. And in Libya, there's literally nowadays slave auctions going off right now. And so this is the big issue where brown folks, we have to kind of step in and say, nah, Trump is telling us what he's going to do. Trump is telling us who he's targeting. And unfortunately, we have brown folks, Latinos for Trump, that are putting halos on that shit when we all see what's going on. There's 600,000 illegal European immigrants in America, but you don't see fucking raids of white people at hospitals. You don't see raids of white people at schools or churches, but you only see that with brown people. And you only see the rhetoric of we have military aged men when they're referring to brown people. However, if they're referring to white Afrikaners from Africa, even they're pro-apartheid, which means they're completely against minorities. We want to welcome them with open arms.
And
All
I
of a sudden,
agree.
we have
Listen,
room.
I agree a lot with what you're saying as far as he's just going after Brown. To me, yeah, go after everybody else that's illegal here. I have no problem with that. But I believe that most people that voted for Trump, they're happy with it, bro. I mean, I'm not. Like, as far as the immigration part, I am not for raiding construction sites. I'm not for raiding restaurants. I'm not for picking up people who have been here, they're working, they're taking care of business. Those are the people we want to leave in this country, right? I'm not for, but there's a lot of people that don't care, bro. They voted for one thing with Donald Trump, love him or hate him. He is one of the very few presidents I've ever known. I've been following politics since Ronald Reagan, that what he says he's going to do, he's going to either do it or he's going to try. He told you he's going to do the tariffs. He told you he's going to lock down the border. He told you he's going to start deporting people. He's like, and people are being surprised. Like, this is what he said. But when I speak on it, and that's why I made that video that we talked on, was, okay, bro, I agree. I'm the sellout. I'm this, I'm that. But now what? Are we going to just continue to argue over this, debate over this? So let's say I agree with every single thing you just said, Westbay. Now, what do we do to stop the current administration from deporting people that shouldn't get deported?
Well, this is a scary part, you know, because first let's first unpack of who are the people that shouldn't get deported. Because my priority is Americans. Americans shouldn't get deported. And if you're talking about getting rid of due process law, that is the fundamentals of the American. That's the greatest thing. That's why the United States is so much better than every other country in the world. Because I could talk shit, I could bitch and complain, and unless you can prove in a court of law that I've fucking broken the law, I got not just one but two middle fingers for you, right? Trump's trying to get rid of that. That is why he is one of what I feel like one of the most potentially worst presidents in American history for brown people. For brown people, I'm not saying that for gay, black, Muslim, Jewish. I'm saying for brown, Native, and Latin Americans. That is the worst, because if you're targeting only us, and we all see it, we all see it. Everybody sees it. If you're targeting only us, and even worse, you're trying to set a precedence where that crowd right there, the brown folks that just look illegal, we could ship their ass off before they even see a judge. We have court cases where a mom is literally showing up to the judge saying, I got the birth certificate right here. What the fuck are you talking about? And they still deported that kid. And even worse, they deported them to a gulag where they will never be free again. So when we talk about criminals breaking the law, it is not a felony. It's not a first-degree felony for crossing the border. That's the same as jaywalking, right?
Yeah.
And we're giving people death sentences and life sentences for simply jaywalking. And we're not giving white people that. We're not giving the Jewish folks fleeing Israel or the Palestinian folks doing that. We're simply doing Latin and brown folks. And that's when you're like, bruh, that's the home team right there.
And I agree with the majority of what you said, but like I said, now what? What do we do? Do we just keep complaining about it or what?
No, hell no. That's why I'm proud to live in Northern California, because here in Northern California, like it or not, that's why we got sanctuary cities, and the Republican side might villainize the sanctuary cities to say we're protecting pedophiles. But if you actually get into the nuts and bolts of the sanctuary city, what that does is that prioritizes the rapists, that prioritizes the pedophiles, that prioritizes the violent criminals to ship their asses out of here, get them the fuck. I'll put some money on that shit. But what you don't want is some mom that is working at cleaning some rich white person's house, and that white person rapes the fuck out of that woman, and she can't even report it because she'll get deported. And what was going on was you had a lot of these folks preying on the undocumented community, and oftentimes there would be serial rapists, serial killers that the immigrant community had no problem. They're like, man, we had some workers working with them. They disappeared, and they could identify these people, but they were too intimidated because of their citizenship status to identify these serial rapists, these serial pedophiles, these serial killers. And so here in Northern California, we said, fuck the federal government. If they want to be hella fucking foul and racist to us, we're going to create our own local policy, a sanctuary city. That's why we looked up to Libby Schaaf here in Oakland, where Libby Schaaf warned all the brown folks right before the Trump raids. Hey, brown folks, Trump is about to target y'all. He ain't give a fuck about no Canadians or no other motherfucking people on earth. But you brown folks, he's going to target you. So do not come out of your home. Don't answer people. Let's show people their rights. Let's teach people what is the difference between a privilege and a right. And let's set local policies where we protect our own.
Well, I think some of the local policies are wrong, though. First of all, sanctuary cities are just a paper shield. They're not real. First of all, and Trump is he's showing that they're raiding San Diego. I'm sure they're going to be raiding up north pretty soon. You're going to see it. They're in the county jails here in Los Angeles now. They're going to be in the county jails over there where you're at pretty soon. The sanctuary city was more of just given, we feel better, but it really means nothing when it comes down to it, because the federal government can still go in there and pick up and they will. But don't you think at some point, like let's say with the county jails, don't you think it'd be better if the municipalities and the county jail say, you know what, you can come in here. If anybody's a felon who's done some stuff, you can deport them. But the sanctuary city thing, what it does is it holds people that should have been deported sometimes, like some of the guys who became real big by killing and raping some young ladies last year, the year before, that should have been deported because they got caught for numerous shoplifting, numerous DUIs and stuff like that. Sometimes the sanctuary cities, what it does, it helps some of the illegals that shouldn't be here start victimizing people here.
I absolutely, again, no policy is perfect. And unfortunately, criminals always take advantage of loopholes, and usually go after the most vulnerable. But let me stress this again, because this is what is important about sanctuary cities.
Okay.
Sanctuary cities is not protecting pedophiles. Sanctuary cities is not protecting murderers. Sanctuary cities is not protecting rapists. What their sanctuary cities is doing, and in fact, sanctuary cities is not prohibiting the federal government from doing anything. They're just saying, we're simply not going to work with you to do your job. Federal government got to do a job. Good luck. Best of luck to you. You're not going to get our help for us to do it. Our police are going to work on our criminals.
Wouldn't
Y'all want to come in and do some federal shit? Go ahead. Good luck
don't you
to it.
think? Don't you think though? And this is where I'm getting at when I say now what? Don't you think it'd be better? Let's say California. Let's not even talk about the other part of the country. Let's say California. Wouldn't it be better for politicians to get together, have a meeting, and say, "Listen, man, we're gonna have a meeting with the Trump administration. This is what we're offering. We're offering to help them. We're offering to help them get the criminals off the streets, the rapists, the killers, the guys who shouldn't be here,
Absolutely.
but with the condition that you're not gonna raid local businesses. You're not going to raid people in the field. You're not. And I think what's going on, especially with the Trump administration, is okay. You're not going to let me in. Then I'm going to knock the whole place down. It's almost like when you go to court and you say, "Hey, man, here's your plea, and you know you're guilty. Here's your plea bargain. And if you don't take it, I'm taking you for life, bro." And that's what's going on right now with the Trump administration.
Well, I think there's some confusion right there. Let me state this again. That's what the sanctuary cities are. Sanctuary cities are literally saying, for example, out here in the Bay Area, I'll say in the East Bay, the Oakland side of the Bay Area, right? We have the jail that we have, the Thunder, we call it the Thunderdome, but Santa Rita, that's our jail, right? Santa Rita would simply, because first off, rapists, pedophiles, and murderers don't get out on bond, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what jails you have, but they usually have a no bond hold. If they're a flight risk, they're a no bond hold. So that's really far few and in between that happens, period. But second, the most liberal jail in the country, that would be here in the Bay Area, Santa Rita. Santa Rita would tell ICE, look, we're not going to let you inside our jails, but we are going to tell you we're releasing immigrants at like 4 a.m. These immigrants are obviously undocumented, whatchamacallits. They're only going to be in the parking lot. It's only going to be them. ICE picks up and swoops them and takes them. So that collaboration is happening. That collaboration has been happening since the first Trump administration. So that's happening. So what people are saying, hey, these sanctuary cities are doing that. We already are. We've been doing that. Now, don't get it twisted. Democrats, the extreme Democrats, they don't even like that. But just like, again, common sense and compassion, the majority of us in our Big Ten, we're like, nah, not only does this sanctuary city protect maids that are going in house cleaning and being able to say, hey, I was raped while I was cleaning someone's house, and turn in that rapist or serial rapist. It's also prioritizing ICE to say, hey, this guy was arrested for jaywalking. Don't waste our fucking tax dollars shipping his ass to El Salvador. This guy here, he fucking raped like 5 women. Ship him. That's the priority. That's what sanctuary policies do. Instead of just targeting, like you just said yourself, instead of going to construction sites, we prioritize the worst of the worst. That's the difference versus
Well,
having one big broad
I
brush
think
that says,
you guys do as sanctuary cities, but the federal government doesn't, and they're not going to. They're not going to. You already see what's going on in Tallahassee, and over there it's mostly because the governor as well. But all that's going on, it's coming over here. And we saw raids in San Diego and some other stuff out here, and I think in the SGV. All these federal raids are coming to a home near you. And my question is, okay, the sanctuary cities, like I said, it's just a paper dome. It's not really stopping them if they want to come in here. So what do we do? Like me, my option is, I mean, my thing that I'm saying is we need to come together. We need to agree and disagree on certain stuff that we can't agree on. But my thing is we need to come together and do a boycott. And I'm talking about 2 weeks, no work, no this, because if not, nothing's going to get done, bro. I hate to break the news to you and anybody else who agrees or disagrees with me. Nothing is going to get done because all it's going to be, it's just going to be the same rhetoric back and forth when we're having actually a great conversation. Thank you for, by the way, just to let you know that. But unfortunately, this conversation without any bite means nothing. Trump sees like protests and all that. Like it's a joke. Those protests to them are a rally for the huge right-wing Trump supporters. They love it. They're like, look, when I see somebody getting picked up at a construction site, I'm like, dude, that's so wrong. When they see it, they're like, oh hell yeah, this is what I voted for. So unless we can make them feel it in the pocketbook, in the construction sites, in the food industry, I don't think anything's gonna change, brother. What do you think?
Okay, so I got there's a lot there. There's a lot of issues there. One, I think, like, what can we do? I think we need to stop blaming immigrants on that issue. You know, a lot of the times, if you wanted illegal immigration to stop, the same way you would try to stop a liquor store from selling liquor to a minor, do you arrest every kid that comes out of the bar? Or do you tell that bar, I'm going to take your liquor license away from you? Right? If we was really concerned about illegal immigration, we would tell every corporation, every farm, if you hire an undocumented worker and you pay them slave wages, we're going to strip your business license from you. Work would dry up overnight. The same way landlords like to target undocumented families and rent out a room instead of renting out a single family home, which drives up rent for usually Black and brown Americans. We're going to tell them, the way you're predator targeting immigrants, we're going to take that land from you. The same way if you were selling drugs out of that house. Again, immigration would dry up overnight. But that's not what the issue is. The issue is they want arrests. It's a cat and mouse game where they say, hey, we got a bunch of different arrests, we got a bunch of different deportations, but we didn't really actually address anything. We didn't actually solve anything. We just kind of whack-a-mole with the scary monster, and it's brown folks like us that need to get villainized. And when you ask us, hey, what is it that we should do? I'm gonna be honest. That's why I'm proud of Northern California. I think the rest of the country needs to take a page from Northern California to know, yes, it is a paper shield. It is a paper shield, but it is some form of shield. And more importantly, it is slowing down, it is preventing, and it's not a bad thing. And
Hey,
again,
Westbay, I gotta disagree with you as far as taking a note from Northern California, especially San Francisco, man. That place has become such a hellhole of drugs, of homelessness. You guys used to have maps of where I can go see beautiful sights in San Francisco. Now you have maps of where all the shit is from all the homeless and drug addicts over there. So I understand what you say as far as that, but as a whole, the Frisco area has deteriorated, bro, and it's expensive where nobody can live. So that's the part that I think a lot of people have a hard time like relating to when you say that, because the city's begun worse and worse, and that is the epitome of what a liberal democratic city is. And if that's what a democratic liberal city is, I don't want no part of it, bro.
now let me break that down to you, because that is the confusion right there.
Okay.
That is exactly the confusion. Now you take one liberal policy. In fact, I had interviewed Senator Aisha Wahab, who is our senator, about that policy, the tents and people looting and all that shit. Right. That was another overcorrection. What was going on was, you would have these major corporations paying somebody minimum wage, and then someone would come in and try to steal something in Oakland, California, right, or San Francisco, because that's some harm. That's the city, it's city life.
Yep.
And you have someone making minimum wage, where they're forced to put their life on the line to stop someone stealing something for $20. You know what I mean? So they made it that in order to protect them, which is an overcorrection. And this was a state policy. This wasn't a local policy. This wasn't a Bay Area. This wasn't a regional policy in the Bay Area. This is entire state, even Republican districts too, right? And so they would put this policy where, hey, businesses can no longer force people to stop people. You got to let them, if they're going to steal something, let the police handle that. And then unfortunately, police, because they were trying to be populists, right, and pander to them, they lightened the load. That's an overcorrection. I ain't mad at that. I ain't mad at them.
Governor Newsom, though. That's a Democratic guy. That's Governor Newsom. Governor Newsom came from your area, bro.
And let's remember, when Governor Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco, it was one of the prettiest cities in the world, one of the nicest cities in the world.
Yeah, he destroyed it.
No. It wasn't until after he left. And let me explain, because people don't understand this. This is where the confusion is.
Okay.
Earlier, when I said you have a lot of people, and especially in the Bay Area, You have a lot of people that will wear a Democratic hat, but they are as far right wing as you can possibly be. And I base this on their policies, not the hat that they wear. Let's break down San Francisco. You have a lot of people living in tents in San Francisco because whenever the Democrats try to come in and put rent protections, tenant protections, a cap on rent, you have these Republicans who are financed by developers, financed by California Apartments Association. They come in and they shoot that shit down while
Agreed.
wearing a Democratic hat, but they're
Agreed.
fucking Republicans.
Agreed.
And these people have taken a monopoly over here. And again, I don't know what Southern Cali's like, but here in the San Francisco Bay Area, you have these prestigious Republicans running San Francisco, running Oakland, California, right? But they claim to be Democrats, but every one of their policies are Republican policies, whether it's the police. If we had Democratic policies in the Bay Area, we don't want to defund the police. It was the Republican Party that set that
Oh,
bill.
that's a
We
far
want
fetch. So
civilian
you're
we
just saying
want civilian oversight. We want to know that the police that are doing their job, they're not stealing overtime and they're actually being held accountable. Those are Democratic policies. And usually when you have those type of transparency, you have a great relationship. But instead, politicians want to pander to the Police Officers Association, which isn't a bunch of hippies. That is a far right wing organization. And if you want to be elected as a politician, especially when it comes to like supervisors, city council members, you need door knockers, which cost like $200,000. So you need the Police Officers Association to endorse you. And anybody that knows anything about politics knows that's not a group of liberals. So how are these group of far right wing Republicans picking all these politicians and even more having these politicians place all these conservative policies, which is
so.
destroying the
So
Bay Area?
Westbay, what you're telling me is that what's ruining the Bay Area is Republicans running as Democrats.
Absolutely.
This might be
Absolutely.
the biggest story of the year, bro.
No, let me explain why. I swear to God, if you come to the Bay Area, you have no
I'm gonna
chance
pull up, fool. I'm gonna pull up.
I'm gonna tell you, as a Republican in the Bay Area, you have no chance to be elected in any
Oh, no,
campaign
I agree with you
because you won't even be invited to a debate.
to the party.
In
Yeah.
order to be on any debate, you have to be a Democrat. So you're non-existent. So in order to even have a chance, you gotta register as a
All right,
Democrat.
fool. Hey, Chris, we're going Democrat, bro. We're going.
That's why I said, I'm gonna be honest. A lot of your local elections have nothing to do with Democrat, Republican. Look at the policy. The policies are either going to be there's a cap on rent, so you don't have people living in tents, right? There's going to be a civilian oversight board where people have a great relationship with their police that are policing them. Or you have a Republican policy where there's no regulation on rent. You can have rent go as high as you want. Well, that's what's happening in San Francisco.
Well,
Rent's like $7,000.
the same thing is happening here in Southern California, but Southern California, like over there, maybe it's Democrats, bro. I pushed to vote for rent control. People say you're crazy. We don't want to. Me, if you want your rent to stay, somewhere that your kids can live at, then you need to get some kind of rent control. But over here, it's the same thing as over there. The props that made it where it's 1,000 less for stealing. Then you have people going in there multiple times stealing, shoplifting. They would never get a felony. You can set up tents. There's no more loitering laws. I mean, all these laws that were passed on the whole state, that is Democratic run state. You can't. That's what I'm saying. You can't sit there and say like you are right now in the city, but in the state, has Gavin Newsom, from the day he came in to now, has he made the state a better place quality-wise to live in or a worse place to live in?
Well, again, I think that's kind of a trick question because California.
Worse. It's not a trick question to me. He's made it much.
It is. Let me explain. Let me answer it. If I could just answer that.
All right, brother.
So, in anywhere in the United States, there's no kings, right? So Gavin Newsom isn't a king. There's three bodies of government. You have the assembly members, the state senators, and the executive office, the governor's house. Before Gavin Newsom can do anything, those two different houses filled with all kinds of representatives have to put something on his desk. And oftentimes, depending, again, all those different representatives, they need endorsements from certain unions, from certain associations, and those are really conservative laws. And so you're saying, hey, when Gavin Newsom was in San Francisco and he didn't have to pander to the entire state, he just pandered to the liberal hippies in San Francisco. We had a bunch of liberal policies. We had the rent was way cheaper. You could buy a house with one income. When Gavin Newsom left San Francisco, we no longer have that liberal hippie running San Francisco. And unfortunately, he's not a king, so he couldn't take his San Francisco policies and mandate that on the entire
It's
state.
called
That's
the
not
veto.
how government works.
It's called the veto. He could have got a lot of those bills and said, "You're crazy. I'm not signing this. I'm not signing the bill." When I saw that bill come across, I'm like, "Oh, crime's gonna go through the roof." From the streets, homies from the street. And that's the thing I think that happens is you're a guy who has a lot of like middle ground common sense, but unfortunately, the higher rank of the party, bro, doesn't have that, bro. They could be college educated, Harvard, and still be una bola de pendejos, straight up. And you got a lot of common sense, which they don't have. But I hope that, you know, a conversation like this will get us a little closer to understanding one another. And I definitely understand where you're coming from, bro. I think we have much more in common that we do not. At the end of the day,
I think platforms like ourselves, you know, I think it's kind of our responsibility to what we call masking your policies. Oftentimes what Democrats will do, and you know, you'll see me calling out a lot of local Democrats. You know, I hold local Democrat politicians to the wall, right? And again, I'm a proud Democrat, but what you will see is Democrats who are, like I said, who are not Democrats. They literally vote on conservative policies which hurt us, and then to mask that conservative policy that they just voted on locally, they will sit there and grandstand about Trump on some national issue, or even worse, about Putin and Russia on some international issue. And that's what they use to say, look, see, I'm a radical Democrat. I'm for gay flags. I'm for Ukraine. I'm for Palestine. I'm against civilian oversight boards. I'm against tenant protections. I'm against immigrant rights. But I'm a diehard Democrat. And that's the point. And instead of platforms picking that up and exposing that this politician is supposed to be a progressive, but they're literally financed by the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, since when is that a Democratic fucking organization?
right.
And instead of us calling it out, a lot of local platforms here, no, you call that shit out, you're going to get blacklisted. And it isn't going to be, again, the democratic people. It is a couple, I'm gonna say, out of 1.6 million Alameda County residents, you have 100 people that control all of us. And they may wear the Democratic hat, but their values are far more right-wing than Donald Trump.
It kind of sounds like the sports where you got 1% of people running the sports. Hey, brother, we're running out of time. Westbay, my man. I appreciate the conversation. I will invite you back in a few weeks. You want to come back and hit other topics, bro? Please let people know where they can find you, Instagram and all social media platforms.
Hey, shout out to all my folks in NorCal. I know a lot of my NorCal folks. I wanted to be the example to show that brown folks, we can disagree with each other and not hate each other.
That's right.
We can disagree with each other and agree to disagree, and afterwards go drink a beer. Especially us platforms. Oftentimes, people want to create controversy. No Jumper wants Texas brown versus California brown, Northern brown versus Southern brown, and all that equals is brown killing each other. So I hope that platforms like me and you, because, you know, oftentimes, you know, you'll say, well, what can we do? What can we do? We can lead by example, you know, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't win. I got it from both sides. My democratic backing is like, you're going on a Trump supporting platform. You're a fucking traitor. You might as well be a Republican. You must love Donald Trump. Traitor, right? And I also got some street politics where, like, man, those guys wear a lot of blue over there. I ain't feeling that whatsoever at all. And again, it's like, hey, man, you know, whatever all those policies are, what I want all brown folks in California to know, we're not the fucking minority. We're the majority. Right. We're the majority of this state. Yet we're so divided. We're split up smaller than the smallest communities.
Yes, sir.
And so I'm hoping that, you know, as our platforms, if we work together moving forward, that we can simply be a roadmap to that.
Absolutely, brother. Hey, man, great words. Appreciate you coming on. Westbay, you guys can find him. We're on Instagram and YouTube. Homie, you let them know.
Hey, you can follow me on the IUG on Instagram. You know what I'm saying? The TV show is going to come back next month. We playing music videos every single night on your TV at 10 p.m. uncensored. And we're going to try to have a conversation with the hood where we teach the hood that local politics, not Trump, not Biden, local politics is what affects your everyday life. That's why when we had Gavin Newsom running the Bay, it was one of the best damn cities in the world.
He's full of lies. Hey, appreciate it. Once you wait take him out of the room real quick. Yeah. I'll be right with you. Hey, appreciate you guys for tapping in. This was a great conversation. Shout out to the Bay Area. Shout out to the North. Shout out to everybody down here, down South. Shout out to all the states. In about 4 minutes, the 44 Vato interview will be dropping. Make sure to check that one out, people. God bless and power to the people. All right, Chris, get us out of here.